Hi. Well, we finally made it up to the chordates, to the chordata. We started out with the sponges, and now we've climbed all the way up here, and we're at the chordates. And they include several groups, one of which is us, the humans. That's cool. Now, most chordates are vertebrates. This is confusing because at first you think that chordates all have a vertebral column, kind of like we do. But that's not true. There's very specific characteristics that are going to make a chordate a chordate. And they are the following. It has a dorsal hollow nerve cord. So it's kind of what you think of as your nerve cord that's within your spine. Pharyngeal pouches. So that's something to do with the pharynx here that you have. It could be a slit that looks more fish-like this guy is a chordate, which is kind of strange. But he has some sort of slits here that are close to your pharynx. And the third one is a tail, a post-anal tail. So if the anus is here, then the tail goes beyond that. And so how it is that we don't belong here because we don't have a tail, but we do have one in the embryo. Embryologically, we have one. And then it recedes. By the time you're born, you have no tail. But at one stage of development, we fit inside this group. So let's look at something really simple like this little organism here. And it has that cord, notochord, which is dorsal. It's on the back side. It has pharyngeal slits in the postanal tail. So this is a chordate, even though it's not the image that you would have, I think, of a chordate. Let's look at them. This is enlarged, and the same idea, just showing you that sort of dorsal nerve cord, and then in yellow, this is the notochord, which is some sort of structure that travels along the back. So for us, we have the spine and the cord, and this would make it so that this organism here indicated is a chordate. So and that was a lancelet. So in this diagram, remember we went from the sponges up to the chordates. Now we're going to take those chordates and go have a whole new division again. And it's going to go from these little guys that don't look like they have spines, right? Tunicates, all the way up to the top, which is the mammals. And what are we going to look at along the way? We're going to look at, does it have a skull? Does it have vertebrae? Does it have jaws? Maybe it has a skull but no jaws. Does it have some sort of a lung? Does it have 4 legs? Does it have an amnion, which is during development? Is it in a water sac? Does it have hair and mammary glands? So we're going to climb our way up this second clade here. This one relative to the chordates alone. Look how, just as a general view, we're going to go from these little guys that look like a sponge, but they're in a whole different advanced group, which are the chordates. Lancelet that I showed you that looks like a fish. A hagfish that looks like a fish without a head. Lamprey. And then finally up to what you think more of as something that has a vertebral column, which is fish, amphibians, reptiles, and mammals. Okay, so let's work our way up through there. Just to be absolutely certain that you got this, here are the features listed again. A notochord, which in many chordates develops into the backbone. So for us, it's our bony part of our spine. 2, a dorsal hollow nerve cord. In many chordates, it develops into the spinal cord. So we have a backbone. Inside the backbone, we have a spinal cord. Then we have some sort of pharynx, which is close to where we swallow, is your pharynx. These organisms have these little slits close to the mouth or throat. Really, it's throat. And then the postanal tail. So those are the 4 characteristics that will make up a chordate. You need to know those, so be sure you know those. Tunicates are the simplest of these that have those four characteristics. Look how simple they are. They're kind of like a sponge in that they have, water's going to come in here and then shoot out the other side, and that's how they get their food. They have a little simple intestine, an esophagus, stomach. They have these throat area with these slits, dorsal, hollow nerve cord. So it fits the bill, even though they're not what you think of as a vertebrate, right? They're not a vertebrate. They are a chordate. These can be beautiful, these tunicates. They look like sponges. And in the Caribbean, there's all sorts of colorful tunicates that are really fun to look at. We have some around here too. Slightly less colorful, but pretty also. Lancelets. Lancelets filter feed with their tails buried. So they'll, bury their tail and then do like the tunicates do, which is filter feed the water as it goes by. And this is an example of Florida again. These are all tropical waters. In the tunicates, the larvae are free swimming, which means they sort of disperse and then land somewhere, and then the adults attach somewhere and stay. So very simple organisms. There's the lancelet again. And the gill slits here are mostly feeding structures, less so to breathe and more so to feed. So those were these two simple, tunicates and lancelets. And we're going to start making our way up to look at this. Those organisms that have cranium. They have something that looks like a head or a cranium. And that takes us to the hagfish. Very weird marine invertebrate. Hagfish have a cranium, right? So it's in here, in this little skull-like structure, but no spine, as we think of it. So they have another adaptation. They're soft-bodied, and they have an adaptation that helps other organisms not eat them. And that is they secrete this sticky slime, and a fish that's trying to bite it and all of a sudden gets a mouthful of slime will let go and not eat it. So they are pretty spectacular. I want to show you, it has these pieces of cartilage, cranial cartilage. The head would be over here. And so it's kind of the beginning of a skull. But that's it. It's not going to extend back to the back end of the body. No bone there. This is just cartilage around the head. Look at the hagfish slime. So if you were to hold on to it, it would start secreting this substance, and you can get these forceps and tweak it out. And this is someone who's just touched it in a bucket, and look how much slime they release. I mean, it's remarkable that they can do this. It's crazy. There is a really good video on it. You should see it posted on my canvas. So what do they eat? Well, they eat worms, anything that's dying or dead, or shrimp, pieces of shrimp, dead shrimp, hermit crabs, little bony fish, anything that's sort of left over that's dying or dead, because they don't have the capacity to attack something, but they can eat it if it's available. Who eats hagfish? And look at it on the barbecue. So there are some cultures that eat hagfish, and this one has been skinned, so supposedly very tasty. I don't know. I have not had hagfish. So let me tell you a little bit more about the slime that clogs the gills and choke. You have to look at that video that I've posted, because it's very funny, and you can see how much of this slime this organism can produce. I'll show you pictures. Look at this. It was a hagfish truck accident in Oregon on I-5 in 2017. It was a truckload of live hagfish that they were transporting, because people eat them and they want them to be fresh, so they had them live. And the truck got into an accident. look at the hagfish all over, strewn over the highway here, and look at the slime. It just, invaded. It was just all over these cars. I can't imagine what it was to clean that up. Okay, that's all you want to know about hagfish. They have a cranium but no backbone. So let's move up now to the lampreys, cartilaginous fishes, and bony fish. So which way are we moving? Now we're going not just from a cranium, but vertebrae. So now they have a spine. So we're coming up to spines. And a spine is, the lamprey up towards the fish. The lamprey has no jaws. And these are sucking, nasty parts that will attach on and suck from their prey. This is a lamprey attached onto a guy. I guess they're having fun with this, but I wouldn't enjoy that, I don't think. Some of these lamprey are parasitic on fish here in the Atlantic, and so they will attach onto them. And they will leave a little wound like this. So they are parasites. They have sucking mouth parts, and they do parasitize larger fish. Do they have a backbone? Well, they have a cartilaginous skeleton, and they don't really have a true vertebrae like we think of our vertebrae, but just cartilage along this notochord. So it's kind of like the beginning of vertebrae. There are some that are not parasites, and those just feed on detritus, which means dead material, and microorganisms. So decaying plants and organisms that are just dead, and they will feed on that. That's a lamprey. Lampreys have been a big problem. They invaded the Great Lakes, and nothing eats them, so they did super well, and they just took over. And they had to have massive efforts to try and remove these from the Great Lakes, because it was sort of clogging up all sorts of things. And ecologically they were messing up the balance of the other organisms that were there. So let's move up towards the fish. That's a true vertebrate. Now we see a backbone, a true backbone like this. Okay, and that's kind of what we think of as a vertebrate. Cartilaginous fish come first. The notochord, which is present in the young, is replaced by cartilage. So these guys don't have true bone, they have cartilage. So they're going to be called chondrichthyes. Chondrichthyes lack the ribs. They really can't carry their body weight if they were on land, because they would totally crush. So sharks are within this group. I like this cartoon. It says, you have no ribs, you'll crush on land. You can't go on land if you're a cartilaginous fish, because you can't support your body weight. This is what a cartilaginous fish skeleton would look like. It would have pieces of this cartilage with these supporting rods and spine, but not throughout. Then we get to the osteichthyes. Osteo is bone instead of chondros, which is cartilage. So chondrichthyes or osteichthyes. And these are truly the bony fish. So we went from cartilaginous fish to bony fish, right? Lampreys, cartilaginous fish, bony fish, and we're moving up to the amphibians. So we're out of the water, right? Amphibians, they live on land. They're no longer like fish in the water, but their eggs must remain moist. So they they're sort of partially aquatic, partially not, because their young needs to be laid in the water. If not, it will desiccate, it will dry out. So even though they are tetrapods, and they have limbs, and they are seemingly terrestrial and completely terrestrial, they retain a strong link to the water because they must go back, lay their eggs in the water if they're going to have offspring. So it's kind of like, yes, left the water and a terrestrial, but not entirely. That is an amphibian. Salamanders too, they go down into the water and lay their eggs, and that way the egg stays moist. So how would you solve that problem? If you wanted to be entirely terrestrial and not have to have water at all, then going from the legs here isn't enough. What you need here is an amnion. What you need is to have some sort of wet environment to develop your young in. And that would solve the problem because your young wouldn't dry out, correct? So that's when we move into the reptiles. The amnion I'm reading here allows reptiles and mammals to breed in a dry habitat. So the amniotic egg, right? This is an egg with an amnion here, and it is moist and wet, and it has a leathery outer layer for the egg so that it does not dry out, and it has its own yolk so that it can nourish the developing embryo. In that way, you have your moisture all enclosed in this shell, and that then allows you to not have to lay it in the water. And this, of course, is an organism that has a uterine cavity, and that has the fluid also, has a placenta, and this amnion, this amniotic sac that allows this developing baby to stay moist. Both of them the same thing, one with a shell, one in a uterus. So reptiles really were the first vertebrates on dry land. They include the snakes, the lizards, and the birds. And they lay these amniotic eggs, and they'll do fine on land. Remember that once you move on land, dehydration is a big deal. I mean, we too live in fear of dehydration. We need to be drinking. We can go without food for longer, but we can't go without water because we will dry out. So dehydration is a big deal, and being able to reproduce away from water was also a big deal, evolutionarily. Reptiles are really diverse. They're the turtles, the lizards, the snakes, the alligators, all these are laying eggs, correct? And a bird is in this group too. A bird is a reptile. And then we move up from the reptiles into, we had the amniotic sac, and now the last thing is hair and mammary glands into the mammals. So we say that mammals are amniotes. They have an amniotic sac with hair and milk-secreting mammary glands, and that makes you a mammal. Here's some amazing mammals. And then there are some incredibly unusual mammals. And so these exceptions are fun to look at. And the platypus and the echidna, so these are in Australia, and they are mammals, but they lay eggs. Now that's unusual. So they're called monotremes. These are the ones that lay eggs here, even though they're mammals. Marsupials have underdeveloped young. So this is a possum. They have a pouch, just like the kangaroo, and it's not fully developed, but it continue to develop inside the pouch. And then the placental mammals that have full development within a uterus or an amniotic sac. So here's the echidna that lays eggs and the young nurse, very unusual. I've not seen one of these myself, but it'd be fun to go to Australia and see them, maybe in zoos. And the platypus, which is semi-aquatic, so this one does like the water. Kind of looks like a beaver, but it has a duck bill. And it's venomous, so not many mammals have venom. And it has venom here in the back and hind legs. So it's able to sort of jab you with that venom using these back legs. Very strange. So there they are, the warm fairy milk drinkers that lay eggs or have young complete the development in some sort of pouch or in a uterus. And that was the last of those slides of diversity. So thanks. See you soon.